So I would like to call the Community Planning Committee meeting of Monday, February 12th to order. And committee, are there any additions or changes to the agenda? And if I could, a motion to adopt or approve by Mayor Little, Councillor Donaldson, second. All in favor? Thank you very much. We have no presentation, so public participation. If you want to speak at public participation, please approach the mic, your name and your street number. Street would be great.
Sir Anthony, Michosen Road. I just noticed there was something on the agenda about the short-term rentals, and I was thinking about that because my understanding is that what they're doing is you can still have them if they're like a suite, attached suite, or a detached suite. I mean, I think it's really great that they're not letting people just buy property all over the place for that purpose anymore. So that's great. But I think, I think some of the suites I've seen around that people use are sometimes not really appropriate for living. So I can see, in their favor why they may want to keep them as Airbnb kind of little bed and breakfast type situations. And I think there is a little bit of an opportunity. I know it's not a ton of money, but for business licenses and inspections and, bring some money into Metchosin. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Anyone else? Okay, going once, going twice. Thank you very much. So, committee, we have the minutes of the community planning meeting of January 15th and a motion to adopt the minutes. Councillor Gray?
So moved.
Second.
From Councillor to Councillor Donaldson. Any discussion? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. And now, receipt of the minutes of the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee. Motion to receive. Receipt from Councillor Epp and second from Councillor Gray. And before we adopt receipt formally, I just wanted to walk through some of the highlights of the meeting from January 16th. One of the topics, we did have a number of residents come out to raise concerns about Winfall Road, and I'm going to raise that a little bit later and get into detail. I think we did address the concerns that were raised that night. PTASC does support a dark sky policy that was mentioned with healthy communities, and they're going to be looking at how you can develop, or how we might be able to develop a policy to support dark skies. We also, which is on the agenda, reviewed a further version of the Parks Donation Program. So I'm going to make a request around that in a moment or so. We had a good discussion with the Duke Road neighborhood group around Roadside Trail on Duke Road East. And PTASC is quite supportive of this trail. There will be a feasibility assessment that is going to be coming to this committee once reviewed by PTASC in full. I want to thank Mr. Payette. We were able to do a site visit and a walk today on the trail with Mr. Ron Aubry and our trails coordinator, Ryan Carter. And big thanks to our trails coordinator, Ryan, and the other PTASC members that continue to be out active in the parks and trails that we own, clearing, especially clearing trees after big wind events. Excuse me, so a big thanks to Ryan Carter, and especially Gord Stadola and Jim Nat as well. And one other note, we are continuing to recruit for 3 positions on PTASC. What I understand is that we do have some applications in, but we're accepting applications for a spot on PTASC until the end of the month here. So, Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much. I just had a question about liability insurance for the folks on PTASC. They're doing some heavy work with some big machines, it sounds like. And I'm hoping that, I don't know this and I'm not pressing now, but maybe we could just be sure. An action item would be to be sure that they're covered with our insurance, because they're really doing work on our behalf, it seems to me.
Yeah.
And not that anything untoward would occur, but if it were, I would like to be sure that we got the insurance for them.
Councillor?
I had inquired about this fairly recently, and I was told that that volunteers working on municipal property are covered by our liability insurance. If they're on private property, they're not.
Great. Thank you for the clarity. We've heard this raised, and I keep forgetting what the answer is, so thank you very much. Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, so I also want to reinforce the accolades for the workers. I traversed through all the trails, or quite a few of the trails, and there's been a lot of work done before and after the storm, and a new neighbor actually up in the Arden Road district had commented on how quick the trees and whatnot are coming off of the roads with the public works, but also within the trail network. I just had a question, and more for the public to be aware, but who is the person to contact should there a tree be down or be in a hazardous situation?
So, of course, you can always contact the office, but the person that can be contacted as well is the Trails Coordinator. And the email address, I have it here, it's just trailscoordinator@machosen.ca.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And would it be valuable? I know there's a compromising tree right now that we used to ride under until about 3 weeks ago,
okay.
and it's actually hung up, but it's shifted.
Oh,
we can still ride under if you're on a shorter horse, but is it worthwhile not just a phone call, but maybe tagging it so they can go in and locate it? Or?
Yeah, no, I would suggest letting the TC know, and either just marking it if you can. So kind of all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Always need to see how trees shift about as weather and climate gets them. So
yeah. It came down earlier this year, but it has definitely shifted, probably 8 inches.
Okay. Great. Okay, and I will call the question on receiving the minutes from PTASC. All in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, so if we could go to page 11. At the start of page 11, but really it's actually page 13. So what we have here is the Parks Donation Program Guidelines for staff. Now, this is an update of the guidelines that were set out in 2017. And so there's a few purposes of this. First of all, to clarify the process, to address the fact that the costs from 2017 have changed a little bit, but also to identify that, or address the fact that some of these locations, if you go back to the 2017 guidelines, they don't exist for park benches or memorials anymore. So Blaney Trail, Sea Bluff Trail, I think Taylor Road as well, they've been taken up by benches now. So we felt we just had to address that. There's no specific locations identified in the new guidelines. So an application would come in probably through staff, maybe referred to the Trails Coordinator, and then there'd be a dialogue process that would happen. So speaking of that, one of the reasons why there is a request I have through PTASC to move on these, which I think the next step would be to bring them to council, is because we do have a request for memorial bench on Duke Road, and it's been sitting for about 6 months now. All the work has been done, but we don't have these down to formalize it kind of within administration and council. So, yeah, but any comments on the guidelines? Councillor?
I'd be happy to move that the committee recommend council approve the amendments to the park donation program. I think what you've written here is what the committee's put together is very clear and concise.
Great.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second. Okay. Have the discussion.
Sure.
Okay. So I'll second that. So I know that in the last few years we've talked about there being fewer, and not we, but I've attended lots of meetings where we're having fewer and fewer places. So will PTASC be identifying other places throughout the district?
Yeah.
I know one of the areas that we talked about, I think last year, was even having benches on the municipal property, like just around.
Ironically, we have had a request, even as of today, for such a thing. So,
the other thing I was going to say, we did have a request, I think it was last year, for a picnic table. That has been in the past on the books, but it's a little bit more expensive. we were wondering, I think last year we were exploring the idea of trees, and if we could consider planting a tree, and if there was a specific tree, probably consulting with Katie Nelson on that, but that might be something that PTASC could consider perhaps.
Great. Yeah, and the idea of trees has been raised. There's a sense that once we get into kind of more interesting opportunities and opening the door for more memorial opportunities, it might take a little while to kind of sort through. So we wanted to nail this down and then take some time to be able to kind of do the more interesting ones. So yeah, so thanks, great ideas. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. Great. Okay, so short-term rentals. And this is a report that was sent by our planner to our CAO. And thank you very much for the briefing. I just wanted to, I do have a request and an idea for the committee, but I just wanted to run through really quickly what's contained here. So the memo or the background covers fines, it covers data sharing that the province will be doing through the short-term rental platforms, and they'll essentially be required to provide listings to government, and that this will be shared with government. So big thing is that STR operators need to have business license from local governments, and these must be posted on the website platform. And I remember going through Airbnb and Vrbo this year looking for where those business licenses could be. I didn't see a single one, to be honest with you. So what we understand is that there's 12 business licenses that have been given to STRs in the district, and that there could be as many as 50 operating here. So there's an issue that needs to be addressed as well. Okay, big change to my mind is the principal residence requirement that government has introduced. So you can have an Airbnb in your home, and you can have an Airbnb in a suite, detached secondary suite, or what's becoming known as an alternative dwelling unit. But it must be your principal residence, and that's universal. So no more investment properties in terms of STRs. And I think that's a big one that we should look at here in the chosen in terms of enforcement. The question is going to be information, staffing, and I think more than anything, it's just the will to enforce. It's interesting when you read through and you get immersed in some of the issues around short-term rentals. Maybe it's unfair, but there's people that are looking at this and they really identify housing costs and availability and point the finger at short-term rentals. And mainly from investment properties. So the idea is not to go after those who have legitimate STRs, still viable, but the investment properties, it seems to be posing a problem. So just key dates. May 1st, the Provincial Compliance Unit will be enforcing the principal residence status, and then in 2024 a provincial registry will be established. So it's yet to come in terms of that data sharing. So Ms. Lysician points to a few things that we could consider. So short-term rentals in the chosen are regulated through a business license bylaw, not in our land use bylaw, in the business license bylaw. And there's a definition there around periods of less than 30 days in terms of stay. Okay. Now, what I would like to, and there's also the question of fees, and broadly, it's whether we want to look at amending the bylaw. Now, one of the things I'd like to put to the committee is, I'm not totally clear I want to go after fees right at this moment. I think it's maybe a bigger question to look at. But the one thing that I did look at or notice is that there's nowhere in the business bylaw that talks about the principal residence requirement. So the definition of a short-term rental means the business of renting a legal dwelling unit or a portion of for a period of less than 30 consecutive days, including to a maximum of 4 boarders as an accessoration. So that's the definition in the bylaw, but it doesn't say anything about principal residence. And I'm wondering if we decide we are going to enforce that, if that might become a bit of a barrier for us. Right now, I believe that if we don't have the definition, we leave it up to the province to enforce that principal residence. So I would like to see if we could recommend to staff that they provide us with a report on amendments to the business license bylaw, including building that in. Sorry, I'm throwing this out to everybody without having comments broadly, but comment on that or anything within Ms. Lucician's report, Councillor Graham.
Yeah, on that, I guess I very much appreciate the report. I mean, this is getting us, we're getting the meat now on the bones to understand what's going on. And so I'm not opposed to what you're saying, but I would think that in stages, like when we get the next set of information, we'll know a little bit more. What I understood from the document here was the province on page 1. So they've divided the duties. So we do some things, province does others. It looks like on the principal residence, the province is going to take care of that. The province will confirm if hosts are exempt from meeting the provincial principal residence requirement. So it looks like they're going to do that work centrally. Or at least that's how I read it.
Yeah.
And so if they're doing that, terrific. I don't know that we need to get into it. Then as regards to the fees, I do believe, maybe through yourself to Mr. Payette, I do believe we've got a fees bylaw coming up.
That's correct.
So when that comes, let's recommend that this one be dealt with then. And then I would offer that the other, just adding to what you've introduced us to here, our planner points out to us that we can create fines for improper rentals up to $3,000 per infraction per day, an increase of $1,000. So that is also interesting in terms of our circumstance here.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Gray. Just Councillor Donaldson, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, so we talked about the attached or detached. Do we know the square footage of these units? Will that be in line, or is that something we can use as a guideline maybe with our attached and detached buildings?
Well, I suppose the challenge comes if somebody is renting out a carriage house, for example, that wouldn't be permitted under our land use bylaws. That kind of gets into a tricky situation. But if somebody's renting out an STR to somebody with a detached secondary suite that complies, that's totally fair game.
Right. So if it doesn't comply, or perhaps perhaps the principal residence is that they live in the detached, assuming it's legal.
Yeah.
Then the STR is the house.
Their house. Yeah.
So I'm just not sure how this is going to. We're not going to go and hunt this down, but if we're going to do business license out, it's business.
Yeah.
So we need to understand. I mean, and you've also, I think, included here, unless I'm mixing it with something else, but there would be inspections, like fire inspections, that sort of stuff, because it's a place of business. So the fire extinguishers and whatnot. Everybody should have those, but those things I think are another layer.
Yeah. Your point about the principal residence is kind of an interesting one, in terms of maybe somebody lets out the house. That's what Verbo does, and then they stay in the secondary suite. My sense is that that's probably still compliant, like it's still a principal residence, however big it or small it may be. I think it's worth a question. Yeah. And in terms of inspections, that I don't believe it's covered. It's not covered under the business license bylaw, so that might be something to look at as well. Now, anything?
No, I was just curious that if it's the principal residence, the landowner's living in its own house, and they have a secondary detached dwelling,
Yeah.
You know, is it a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom? Is it the square footage of what our detached suites would be?
Okay.
I think it's just what's the clarity, or is it 2 big houses on a lot? I mean, I don't know. We talked a little bit earlier about, you know, legal and illegal dwellings or whatever. So, yeah, there's a few things to flesh out.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm. Let's get there. I want to challenge. Sorry, I do want to challenge one thing that Councillor Gray raised about the principal residence and like SDRs cannot be investment property. I would like to put forward a request to staff to amend the definition that does build in the principal residence requirement. That would allow us to enforce. As much as I think, you know, the province is interested in this, having a squad of probably may not be even a dozen people trying to enforce this province-wide is I don't think we're going to be, you know, get much attention from that. So I think adding the principal residence requirement into the definition will give us some tools to actually do the enforcement ourselves. So, okay, Councillor Gray.
Sure, I'm open to certainly asking the staff about that, and maybe we could ask about the cost of doing that. I read again from the forms here. While the provincial principal residence requirement will be enforced at the provincial level, local governments should not grant zoning permission to short-term rentals where inconsistent with the provincial legislation. I think the plan, they don't want to download all this, and I'm suggesting we not accept downloading it. In other words, it's their job, let them do it. But I'm not opposed to you asking our planner her views on that. And perhaps then we could also deal with the question of Councillor Donaldson. When I read it, there's no requirements on size. That'll be dealt with by our current regulations on size of suites.
Yeah.
But I think both questions are legitimate. Let's get an answer. Staff can help us just pin that down. But I wouldn't want to, as I'll repeat, don't want to take on duties we don't need to take on given our small size. And that's
no, and fair enough. But Marilyn.
I agree. I don't want to take on any other responsibility from the province either. However, it is the residents of Metchosin that are complaining to us in specific dwellings where they are investment properties and posing considerable parking issues, noise issues for neighbors. And it seems to me that since we have to give them a business license, we should ask them to prove that this is their principal residence, and that would be a site inspection. It's not onerous for our building inspectors. There's only 12 of them. It wouldn't be onerous, and that way we could actually have that's a tool that the province says to look for, is the business license.
Great.
And like also I concur that there's no regulation regarding size of the dwelling.
Great. Okay. Councillor Gray.
Maybe I'll just jump back in here. So I've just received this morning the speculation tax request from the provincial government. That's one of the mechanisms that they use to check who's a resident and where you're living and your various holdings. So they've got the data, they've got the database. I imagine they'll be running those things together to sort this question out. I'm not sure that an inspection tells you very much. It's, you need to look at the records of who owns what and where else do they own houses and all that kind of thing. And not to debate it all here, but let's just get the question to the planner and find out what the best advice is.
Okay, sounds good. Now, I think what will happen in time is the province begins collecting this information, they share it with the local government, and then the government, municipality, is able to make moves as it sees best. So, and the speculation tax, I mean, gathers some information, but the SDR stuff will be much more focused for sure. So I'd like to move that we request staff take an additional look at what legislative tools we may have to more fully comply with the short-term rental legislation, including possible amendments to our building, our our business bylaw, our business license bylaw, including principal residence requirement, possibly putting that into the definition, fines, the use of fines, and also inspections and safety and square footage in terms of the homes that are offered. Good. Okay. So moved. Seconded by Mayor Little. Further discussion. Councillor?
I'm just wondering that the under options to consider, the option 2 there that the planner wrote down on a report, I'm just wondering if that kind of in a general way covers the things that you mentioned, that this, her option there would be a way to start before we get into us deciding on which specifics we need to look into, is to see what more the province has to say, and then decide on what we need to look at as far as our bylaws and so on.
I'll just speak in favor of that approach simply because we've got limited staff time, and let's get a handle on this, because it may come back that some of these, as I think we're talking about, may not be so important and have a lot of research done now, maybe taking up a bit of staff time we don't need to. Perhaps I could ask Mr. Payette about that through the chair.
Mr. Payette, any views? So we have a motion on the table with some specific direction about the business license bylaw, bringing forward recommendations around amendments that will help conform help conform to the new provincial legislation. And then there's an option 2 that is essentially asking, there's more information coming. Let's get that before we make any bold moves. Any sense of what we can do? Oh, sure.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks, Chair. So I think the motions are fine. We're going to be doing all that review anyway, but the motions help us give us some direction. The building or the business permits, we're going to have to address all those issues in the building permits. So we'll make sure that we get that reviewed and matching the legislation, and then the development procedures bylaw as well. We'll just add to the amount of information that we give to residents on what they can and can't do. So go ahead with your motions. They're fine, and we'll add it to the list of things to do with this legislation. Okay. Great.
Councillor Gray.
So just through the chair, I guess we don't want to restrict what the plan looks at just to what we're talking about tonight, but we wanted to do the job that she's talking about in option 2, I think, as well.
So are you proposing an amendment maybe to the motion that and provide further guidance to council as new information comes from the province?
So moved.
Okay. So we have an amendment to the motion that's been put forward by Councillor Gray. We have a seconder to that, and the amendment is just, we also ask the planner to provide us with more information as that becomes available from the province. Mayor Little? Yes. Second? Okay. Discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, so to the main motion, I can't remember it essentially. So
it was all the points. So identified issues, which is in the option thing.
Legislative tools, including the business bylaw, fines, principal residence in the definition, and inspections, size, etc. So, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. Great. Okay, so our planner has been busy and has also given us a memo on the big change with Bill 44, which is now within the Local Government Act. Interestingly, when I went back to have a look at some of the provisions, they're not in the online version of the legislation, which is actually quite disappointing given how sweeping it is and significant it is. But I'll just really quickly summarize the planner's memo. I think as we've heard, and I think collectively have breathed a bit of a sigh of relief, we are exempt from the really expansive provisions of small-scale multi-unit homes. So we won't see triplexes and fourplexes and up to sixplexes being built here in the Chosen. And the big reason, of course, for that is you need both sewer and water. And I want to very much thank the provincial policy people for clarifying and making it crystal clear in the policy manual that yes, you do need both, not just one or the other. What's significant about the housing legislation is our secondary suite bylaw is consistent with the regulations. So that's good news, and we've had that on the books since 2012. Now, there's still work ahead for it. So by June 30th, we have to adjust our bylaws to address the new legislation. Staff are going to be giving some recommendations on that, even though we're largely exempt. I'm sure there's some details that we have to work through. But more significantly, I think for Chosen is we have to conduct a housing needs assessment, and that has to be done by the end of this year. And with that, we are going to have to project what our housing needs are for the next 20 years, and then do the following, excuse me, adjust our official community plan, and then also adjust our land use bylaw to meet those targets. Now, when I went back to the 2021 housing needs assessment, there was identified a need for at least 130 homes, and I forget the time span. Interestingly, they seem to be smaller homes that were identified as the needs, so homes that might be able to be met by secondary suites. There is a methodology that will be coming from the province in terms of, again, how you do your housing needs assessment. So, and those are the highlights. Did anyone else pick anything up? Or,
Well, again, I so much appreciate Ms. Legition putting this together for us, because it provides us the clarity that we were looking for, and I think it's great news. When I think about I think the key message is the province is asking us to address short-term vacation rentals, secondary suites and detached suites, but not asking us to increase density. So we've kind of, the other day we had a discussion about a variance in Matheson Lake, and I think we were drifting a little bit. We stood up, and Mayor Little sent that letter to the province saying we think we should be excluded, and we won. So at this point, I say the province is asking us to preserve our rural character. The province is asking us to keep it low density, consistent with our current OCP and our council policy on that. And so I see this as a big win for us. I get it that by the end of 2025, we'll redo our housing study and we'll just see what's there. But it's my view today, and I look forward to that work being done. But it seems to me we have a lot of room in Metchosin for a greater number of secondary suites that would meet some of the housing needs. Just like other jurisdictions, we're not sure if landowners and developers want to do that, but we are enabling that now. And I can see the minor changes that may be coming here, but I think it's great news for us that we can stick to our low density undeveloped Metchosin at this time and be totally consistent with provincial policy.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? And I think the recommended action. Okay, sorry, there is one piece here, and it's the development procedures bylaw. And this, in terms, is, you know, I've never seen or heard of this bylaw, but this is in relation to holding public hearings. Yeah, it's what Ms. Legition is recommending is that we ask staff to take a look at this and see that it is consistent with the housing legislation that's coming up, and I think we should do that. So, Councillor.
I'll move that staff initiate an update to the development procedures bylaw for consideration at a future council meeting.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Councillors' updates. I should, three things to mention plus two minor ones. So there will be a joint meeting of council and the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee on the 20th, which is a Tuesday because Monday is a holiday. And we did hold one of these in March of last year, and good discussion, and we will still not have the 3 new members, but the 5 remaining members, including myself, should all be there. And again, the crew has been there for some of them for decades and just bring a wealth of experience. So it's thanks to Councillor for making itself available. So the Weir Beach stairs have long been talked about in terms of repair and remediation. And good news is that we have got to start in terms of the process, in terms of getting that work done. So there's been some efforts to engage a contractor and to talk with Public Works, and also we are very much aware that there are some issues with the neighboring property as well, and this will be addressed in terms of a development and remediation plan. And I want to ask Mr. Payette if there's anything further in terms of process and timelines, and of course making sure we don't want to set people's expectations. And right now, we know that things seem to take longer and be more expensive just because they are right now. So, anything further? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and through the community, because this is an important little project that everybody's keen on. So we have engaged a gentleman to work on the stairs and the little trail there, and he cannot get started till April because he's already booked up till April. But in the interim, he's going to visit the municipality on the weekend between now and April, a couple weekends. We're going to go to the site. He's got a kind of a straw man type of idea of what he's going to do already that we've received. We're going to go over his plans. And at the same time, I'm going to take an opportunity to call the direct neighbors and join us maybe and just get some perspective at that time, so that we address concerns ahead of time, which would be kind of nice. I don't think there's really any other information I can give other than those steps. Staff are well aware. Oh, one thing is if staff can do some initial work on the site and prep work, so that when the construction gentleman gets here, he can kind of get going on construction and not have to do so much demolition. We're going to try and get that done in the next couple of months. So.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And I do want to thank Mr. Payette for jumping on this. And there's been a deep interest in the community in getting the stairs reopened. The one other issue I do want to mention as well is road safety, and I think that's a more complicated one. But we have a great team, I think, with the fire chief and our public works lead and Mr. Payette. I think there's room for some good ideas to help improve road safety in that area. So, and one other thing, just the trail. And the work is going to be done so it's consistent with a natural state, rough trail, if you will. Essentially what was there before, but just better. So, Councillor, agree.
Yeah, and just to remind Council, and Mr. Pat may not know, but in all the interest we've gotten from the community in this, we did receive some correspondence citing the cost of CRD for a similar type trail would be a couple of $1,000s. So it may be worth checking with the Public Works at CRD just in terms of what's possible in terms of cost. I know that we want the trail done, but we want it done at the best cost possible, and that I want to acknowledge the advice from that resident to check in with the CRD.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Miller, yes. So this is the audio or the visual portion of the evening. So there were some concerns expressed, I think it was at the last council meeting, but also at the last PTASC meeting, about the potential of a trail extension from Winfall Road all the way through to the Galloping Goose. Now that is a result of miscommunication and maybe some misunderstanding about what was meant so this comes through a Parks and Trails recommendation that came from the consideration of the Beckingham Road subdivision. So Parks and Trails does this all the time. They will often do a site visit, and they will look at a property and recommend where a trail possibly could be. What they did put in their trail was, you can see the dotted blue line. That is essentially bush right now, but it is part of the Winfall Road right-of-way. That is what they recommended. So it comes from the northeast corner of the subdivision and is intended to connect that subdivision to the Galloping Goose. The rest of the extension of Winfall below that area is not going to be touched at all. So, and we mentioned that at PTASC. We didn't have this visual, but I wanted to show everyone. There we go. Okay, 2 really quick updates. We had a wonderful invasive species pull on Saturday with the Machosen Invasive Species Cooperative. Councillor Donaldson was there with 20 plus people, including a number of kids, and that's the biggest poll that has been done to date. So it was very worthwhile. Our focuses were Daphne and Holly, and had lots of fun dealing with blackberries that just didn't want to let you go. We talked a while ago about a carbon credit feasibility study. I did connect very briefly with the organizers today. They expect to have something to us in March, so that is coming. So no other updates than that, but it is coming. So, and with that, we're out. No correspondence, bylaws, or other business, and I wonder if I could have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councillor Gray and Mayor Little, second. All in favor?
Can we do questions, or is that not me? It's okay, I'll email them for you.
Okay.
Cool.
Yes. Thank you very much.